James Carter, a black hotel owner, was evicted from his own establishment, unaware of the impending storm. The employees only judge him based on his appearance to determine if he belongs there, not knowing the twist will change their lives and the system that allows it. Today, James wearing simple jeans and a casual jacket, he intended to blend in, concealing his true identity as the hotel owner. For James, this was not just a test, it was an opportunity to assess the authenticity of the hospitality and mindset of those representing his brand. James had worked tirelessly to reach this point in life, overcoming barriers that most couldn't imagine. Raised in a small, predominantly black community, he had grown up with a determination that ran deep, shaped by the challenges he had faced and the resilience his family had taught him. But despite his accomplishments, he knew that to many, especially those who judged others by appearance, he was just another face. This was the reality he had set out to change, not only in his life but for others who would come after him. He moved through the spacious lobby, taking in the polished marble floors and glittering chandeliers. A sense of pride warmed his heart, but he reminded himself to stay focused. He was here to witness firsthand how his staff treated guests, especially those who might seem ordinary. As James reached the front desk, he noticed a young man, Matt, seated behind the polished counter. Matt was looking down at his screen, his fingers tapping idly at the keys, eyes glued to the screen. James approached the counter and stood waiting, hoping for a friendly greeting. But the greeting didn't come. After what felt like too long a pause, Matt lifted his head just slightly, his eyes narrowing as he glanced up at James. He gave no smile, no welcoming nod, just a curt, "Can I help you?" in a flat tone, as though each word cost him a great deal of effort. James felt the familiar tension in the air. He knew this feeling too well, the silent judgment, the unspoken categorization based on his modest clothing and unassuming presence. But he kept his face neutral, simply replying, "Yes, I'd like to check on a room reservation." But the greeting didn't come. After what felt like too long a pause, Matt lifted his head just slightly, his eyes narrowing as he glanced up at James. He gave no smile, no welcoming nod, just a curt, "Can I help you?" in a flat tone, as though each word cost him a great deal of effort. James felt the familiar tension in the air. He knew this feeling too well, the silent judgment, the unspoken categorization based on his modest clothing and unassuming presence. But he kept his face neutral, simply replying, "Yes, I'd like to check on a room reservation." Matt glanced at his screen, tapping a few more keys without enthusiasm. "Sorry, all rooms are booked," he said curtly, his tone dismissive, as if James's request was little more than a nuisance. James nodded slowly. "Could you double-check? I believe I made a reservation in advance." Matt sighed, barely masking his irritation, and cast another quick glance at the screen. "I don't see your reservation here," he replied, his tone suggesting finality, the kind reserved for people deemed unworthy of further attention. Then, without another word, Matt turned his attention to another staff member, effectively ending the conversation. James remained rooted in place, letting his disappointment simmer beneath a composed exterior. It was a scene he had experienced before, being assessed, rejected, and dismissed, all based on a glance and a few assumptions. But today, he had come prepared to see it through. He wasn't going to walk away. Instead, he wanted to see just how far the staff's prejudices would push them. He repeated his request, this time with a steady resolve. "Could you please check one more time? I have a confirmation for my booking." Matt's expression shifted from mere irritation to something closer to disdain. He barely bothered to look at James, but his sigh was louder this time, a clear display of his annoyance. Without bothering to search more thoroughly, Matt gave James another cold look. "Look," he said, "I've already told you, we're fully booked. Maybe try another place." James felt a wave of frustration, but he kept his composure. "All right then. Could I speak to a manager?" he asked calmly. This simple request seemed to draw unwanted attention. Another employee, a young woman named Sarah, leaned over to Matt and whispered, loud enough for James to overhear, "Why is he still here? Should we call security?" That word, security, hung in the air, carrying with it the implication that James's presence alone was troublesome. Sarah's eyes flicked over him, and James could see the judgment in her gaze, a look he had grown all too familiar with. The idea that his mere presence required removal made his resolve harden. Within moments, 2 large security guards appeared, standing at a distance but watching him closely. One guard, tall and broad-shouldered, approached James with an indifferent expression. "Sir," he said in a firm tone, "we've been informed there's an issue. We need you to leave the premises." James felt the heat of anger flare up inside him, a feeling sharpened by the countless experiences of prejudice he'd faced. But he met the guard's gaze calmly and replied, "I'm not leaving. I have every right to be here." The guard's brows furrowed. He turned to his colleague, then looked back at James with impatience. "Sir, if you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have to escort you out," he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. James took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was the breaking point, and he knew it was time to reveal his true identity. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his wallet, and held up his ID card with a clear, authoritative tone. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My name is James Carter, and I am the owner of this hotel." The reaction was instant and undeniable. Matt, Sarah, and the security guards froze, their expressions shifting from contempt to shock and confusion. Matt's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Sarah took a small step back, her eyes widening with realization. The security guards exchanged uncomfortable glances, their stony confidence fading as the gravity of the situation dawned on them. In that moment, James felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, anger, and a deep, abiding sadness. He looked at each of them in turn, speaking slowly and clearly. "You didn't even check my reservation. You made assumptions based on my appearance. You didn't see a guest, you saw a problem." The silence in the lobby was deafening, with each person's face displaying a blend of embarrassment and regret. Just then, the hotel's manager, Robert, arrived. His face was flushed with panic as he took in the scene. "Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry," Robert stammered. "I didn't realize this was happening. Please accept my apologies." James nodded but did not soften. "Apologies aren't enough, Robert. This incident isn't just about me. It's about how guests who look like me, who look different, are treated here. I can't accept a simple apology and move on. Not when this is how my staff thinks it's acceptable to treat people." Robert swallowed, visibly humbled. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Carter. I promise, we'll implement changes. Mandatory training, a review of all staff practices, whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen again." James nodded, the faintest hint of satisfaction glimmering in his eyes. "That's what I need to hear. This hotel has to set a standard of respect and dignity for everyone who walks through these doors." As Robert assured him that changes would be made, James felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He stepped away from the cluster of silent, stunned employees and answered the call. It was his wife, Olivia. "Hey, honey, I just wanted to check in. How did it go?" Olivia's voice was warm, soothing, the sound of home. "Ah," James sighed, his voice softening. It was intense. They didn't know who I was, so I got the full experience of what happens when someone doesn't fit their mold." Olivia was quiet for a moment, then she replied, "I know that wasn't easy, but I'm proud of you. This isn't just about you, it's about changing a system that keeps so many people down. You're doing what you set out to do, James. You're making a difference." Her words resonated deeply with him, bringing a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Olivia. I needed that," he said, his voice steadier. "This isn't just another day at work. It's about standing up for what's right." When he returned to the lobby, James found Matt, Sarah, and the security guards waiting in silence. He looked at them, his gaze unwavering. "I don't want this to just be a mistake you regret. I want this to be a lesson. Judging people by their appearance doesn't just harm individuals, it harms the entire culture of this place." Matt, who had been standing stiffly, lowered his head, remorse evident on his face. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I should have treated you with respect." James accepted his apology with a nod, but continued, "It's not just about me. It's about the next person who walks through those doors and doesn't meet your expectations. Will they be treated with dignity?" Sarah spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "We understand, Mr. Carter. We'll work to do better. Thank you for giving us a chance to learn." Satisfied that they were beginning to understand the weight of their actions, James turned to Robert, who had been listening with quiet determination. "Robert," James said, "I want to see concrete changes. Sensitivity training is a start, but we need more than that. We need a culture here that treats everyone with respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like." Robert nodded, his expression resolute. "Absolutely, Mr. Carter. I'll make sure this becomes a place where everyone feels welcome and valued. We'll work to earn back your trust." James took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure. As he left the hotel that day, he felt lighter, knowing he had confronted the prejudice head on. This wasn't just a victory for him. It was a step forward in his lifelong journey to build a world where respect and equality were non-negotiable values. As he walked away, James knew that his work was far from over. This incident had reaffirmed his purpose, and he was ready to continue the fight, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been judged unfairly. With his family's support and his own unwavering determination, he was committed to creating lasting change, one step at a time. This day was merely the beginning of a much larger journey, one that would ripple out far beyond the walls of his hotel.